Hello and welcome to Aspiring Leadership, making the move into leadership. Each week, we'll be chatting with various leaders from all different walks of life, learning from their experiences and sharing their advice. It's the perfect podcast for somebody wishing to step into a new leadership role or for a leader who's already there, wishing to continue their development. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Happy Thursday, everybody, and you're very welcome along to this week's episode of Aspiring Leadership, making the move into leadership. Firstly, as always, thanks so much to everybody who has listened in over the past couple of weeks, and in particular to all the guests who have taken part. It's a significant time commitment with their busy lives working from home, and also it takes courage to be able to put your head above the parapet, step up and talk about your own career in a humble, authentic way. So I am genuinely so grateful for them. And if you haven't gotten a chance to listen back, go back and take a listen to the various different episodes, because each one of the guests, so many different learnings and perspectives to share, whether or not you're interested in leadership or not, from just a life perspective. There's so many great learnings to take from all the different individuals, whether it be from a parenting perspective, a professional perspective, a business perspective. There's so much to learn from them all. So yeah, definitely encourage them. And thanks to Janice last week, who was last week's guest. She brought a great sense of energy. She's really inspirational, and her confidence is something that I found invigorating, to be honest with you. So looking forward to this week. This is the 10th episode, believe it or not. I can't believe it that I've made 10 episodes, and it's grown every week. Listenership has grown, but I've been reflecting lately, and one of my mates was texting me, said, what are the common threads? And for me, I think there's five common threads that are popping out from all the various leaders that I've spoken with. So the first one is continuous learning. All of the leaders were very much engaged in learning, whether it be from a professional perspective, but also then taking opportunities to do masters and extra courses and diplomas to help them improve their leadership skills and their personal skills, of course, too. The second one then, I think, is they all took a risk at some point or another within their careers and made a huge pivot. Like, so Alan, for example, was a carpenter, and then he moved to running his own business. Lourdes was involved in operations, and then she took a big change to coaching. Janice the same way, Sandra as well. So many of the guests that I've spoken with at some point or another in their career made a move, whether it be sideways or backwards, or a pause, so that they could then move forward with their leadership ambitions. And that's so important, to be able to make those sacrifices where necessary if you do want to move forward with your career. Because I think there's a perception out there that you can't find that perfect job, and that's something a little bit wishy-washy. But I'm lucky enough to be working in my dream job, a job that I love doing every single day with fantastic people. So that can be achieved, but I had to make sacrifices too, as anybody else who's finding those roles. Now I'm biased with the third observation, but something that's coming through clearly with all the people that I've spoken to is the ability to be able to coach. And what I mean by coaching is to be able to use the fundamentals of what coaching is from a professional capacity in their day-to-day life. So the ability to be able to ask good questions, to listen. I know we all think we listen, but it wasn't until I started learning about coaching that I understood I was never actually listening to people. And when I really began to listen at work and at home, I was so tired for the first few weeks, because it was using a whole different level of awareness that I'd never used before. And then the ability to be empathetic and compassionate, I suppose, to be able to see things from others' perspective, because it's no longer about you, it's about other people more so. Also, I think something that I found challenging throughout the years, and I am working on it. I think the areas that you find challenging, it's all about awareness, is the ability to be able to build your network. Right back from Kenneth, who is the first episode, who's CEO of Galway Chambers of Commerce. He was massive on the network, but so was everybody else. And it's so important, because no man is an island, and you can learn so much from others and their experiences. And also there can sometimes be shorter ways and more effective approaches to what you're doing if you learn from somebody who's already done it before, because they've probably made a lot of mistakes along the way, and the greatest learnings that I've gotten in my life have been from the mistakes that I've made. And then finally, the fifth trend that I've noticed with all of them is they've all evolved over the years. I spoke with a guest this week. I haven't released the podcast yesterday, but if you're not learning, if you're not moving forward, and if you're not evolving, then you're stagnant and you're dying. So it's so important. The leader that I spoke with this week mentioned that he took out a HR book from around 20 years ago, 1997, 2000, that he was studying in college, and some of the concepts that are now massive within leadership were just taking up a paragraph of the book at that particular time. And again, in 10, 20 years time from now, the concepts that are relevant now will no longer be relevant then. And that's also true from an entrepreneurial and business perspective. If we think about Alan and how he evolved his business over the years as well, to ensure that he uh, he continually evolved, or Declan, how he moved from role to role within his career too. So that's hugely important as well. So just to quickly summarize on those, I think first of all, it's being continually learning. Number two, it's taking a risk and sometimes having to move backwards when you're in your career, or sideways if you really want to. Coaching is so important to develop your team and your people, building your network, and then finally evolving continuously. So every week on the program, I like to throw out a coaching question to help people reflect and continually grow as you move through your life, and as we overcome this challenging time that we're all going through right now. And something that myself and Damien are going to speak about in this episode is about, we touch on briefly at the end, how coming from Achill has benefited him from a personal perspective or professional perspective. Um, and we talk about, the growth mindset is something that Carol Dweck has wrote a lot about, but coming from a place like Achill, because of the need to adapt and evolve and be resilient, you develop a growth mindset at a very early age, no matter what organization you're involved in. So the question that I have for you this week is, how has where you come from helped shape you? But I would encourage you not just to consider the positive impacts of where you've come from, but also maybe how the negative impacts have also shaped you too. Let me give you a quick example from my own career. Coming from Achill, we're a real honest, straight talking, direct type of people. There's very little beating around the bush. And it's usually beneficial, because I think in the corporate world it can be refreshing to have someone who's straight talking and honest, but at the same time it can also hold you back. So I've had to learn how to be able to deliver an honest message in a more empathetic, compassionate way, and speak the language of the people I'm speaking with. And definitely in the earlier part of my career, that honesty and directness might have held me back a little bit. So yeah, they're just a couple of examples. So the question again, if you're out at the weekend, you want to do a little bit of writing in an A4 pad, or you're having a walk, it might pop into your head when you're sitting on the couch. How has where you've come from helped shaped you? But explore the positive elements of it, and also some of the more negative elements of it too, because awareness is key. And if you're aware of what those negative elements are and the positive elements, then you can begin to cultivate them and work on them, and make them part of who you are. So, enough talking out of me for today. I want to hand you over to Damien. I would have heard about Damien initially. I don't know Damien really well, and this is very similar to the conversation I had with Declan. If I had met Damien in a pub down Knackle over Christmas, I might have had a 2 minute conversation with him. How are you getting on? Where are you now? What are you doing? How's things in Dublin? And then moved on. But I had a really in-depth conversation with him, got to understand how he worked, how he evolved. Um, and he has had a real successful career, and it's inspirational to meet somebody from the same community as ourselves who has done that. So I'm not going to speak any more about him. He's had a hugely successful career, as I've said already, and I think it's up to him to tell us about it. Hey Damien, how's things? Thanks a million for making a bit of time for me this week and coming on the podcast. So I'm intrigued to hear how a young man from Clonmore has ended up as managing director of KN in Ireland. So it'd be great to hear a bit about that story.
Yeah, sure, Connell. And first and foremost, thanks for inviting me onto your podcast. And I actually wasn't aware of them, and I've listened to a few of them now that you have up on Spotify. So they're very, very interesting, and it's always good to listen to other people and their perspective on their role and how they got there, and their view on leadership and so forth. So it's very interesting, and it's a great initiative, I have to say, and the best of luck with it.
Thanks, man.
I suppose I'm from a small village in Achill, Clough. I suppose I started out my career in the bank, National Irish Bank, where I worked in their operations division. And I suppose part of that was it was shift work, and it was updating the accounts. All the activities during the day would be updated throughout the day and at night. And I worked 8 to 4 one week and 4 to midnight the next week. Obviously, I was keen to get away from that because I played football in Dublin at the time, and we were missing 1 week's training, which 2 nights a week. So I was keen to get back to normal hours. So I moved within the bank into the telecoms division, and I worked there in National Irish Bank then for 8 years, eight very enjoyable years. But like everything else, I was looking for new challenges, and I got an opportunity working for a startup company called Telecommunications. And one of the founders of that particular company was a guy called Patrick Cruz O'Brien, who was the adopted son of Conor Cruz O'Brien. So he had started Telecommunications. And if you wanted to learn everything and anything, join a startup, because you ended up doing every role, and on top of that, you learned a whole lot about all the different types of technology, because you're involved in everything. And I suppose you were working from a blank sheet. So you were kind of building the company from a blank sheet up and putting in place processes, procedures, and all of that kind of stuff that's important to the success of any company in the future. So that was a great grounding at the time. And then, like everything else, money ran short, and we started to run out of money. And at that stage, I decided to move on, and I moved to a US company called WorldCom, or MCI WorldCom. And I worked with them for 4 years. And again, we had a bit of hard luck with them in that they were one of the largest bankruptcies in the US before Enron, actually. And we went into what we call Chapter 11, which meant you weren't bankrupt as such, but you were working through, it's similar to examinership here in Ireland. And that was challenging in that you couldn't win new customers. And really your job was to try and retain existing customers. And again, that all helped my experience and built, all the different types of challenges you come across that has benefited me further in my career. And actually the particular individual that was the owner or the boss of WorldCom ended up being jailed for 25 years. And he only got released there a couple of years ago, and he died within 6 months of being released on health grounds. So the one thing with the US is they don't mess around. So WorldCom was the largest one, which was then followed, I think, by Enron and Lehman Brothers, and so on and so forth. So, when you were in a position like that, where you were just trying to retain customers, I decided to move on, and I got a role in O2, the mobile company, and I moved there as head of their value-added services. And that was working. That was my first move into more, I suppose, commercial, away from the technical into the commercial area, where I was working with the sales department in growing the business in larger corporate type of clients. So I ran a team of 8 consultants, and that got me into more away from the technical to the more commercial, and I kind of stayed within that area since. So I worked there for a number of years in O2, had good years as well. And again, meeting lots of different people, different perspectives on strategy, and again, how to challenge the incumbent in the mobile world, how you differentiate your products, all of that kind of stuff. So that was really, really a good grounding. And then I moved on to 3 Mobile, and I moved in there as Director of Business Initiatives. And that was my first move, where I was reporting directly to the CEO of the company, Robert Finnegan. Robert, since then, 3 obviously took over O2, and now Robert is the CEO of not only 3 Ireland, but 3 UK. In the last year, he was appointed to that role. And again, working directly for a CEO of Robert's experience was excellent, in that Robert had worked abroad for quite a long time for Hutchinson Poway, one of the largest companies in the world. So you were learning all the time from people like Robert, and then you were working with senior managers, peers as such, and that led to a lot of knowledge, good knowledge on how to handle situations, but also how to grow the business. And when you're in a room with 5-6 people with the ultimate goal of how do we grow our business, how do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors, and how do you stay ahead of the game? So stuff like that has been really, really excellent. So obviously my next move is the move I'm in today. Was to KN Network Services at the time. And it was probably my first move moving to a company that was, I suppose, working for the owners. So, previously you worked in a corporate environment, but in this environment, moving to KN, you're actually working for the people that had a vested interest and owned the company. And I started here in June 2011. And just to give you an idea on the growth of the company, we had turnover of 84 million euros then. And last year we had turnover of 407 million.
Wow.
And our employees are just over 2,000. So we've grown extensively in the United Kingdom. Previously, we were very much Ireland focused. When I joined, it allowed the owners to look at opportunity in the UK. So we grew our business there, and we grew internationally as well. And then the year before that, we were taken over by a French company called Circet. So we're part of a larger European group now that's probably a turnover of close to 1.8 billion a year, all in telecoms predominantly. Obviously in Ireland, we would work across not only telecoms would be our largest market share, but we work in power, we work for ESB, we work for Northern Ireland Electricity, we work for Irish Rail, we work for the councils. So we have I suppose, a wide variety of activity, and it keeps you on your toes as managing director. It keeps me on my toes because there's always something different happening. And even this morning, I was reviewing an opportunity in where there's a cable arriving in Old Head and Lewisburg, and it has to be then brought from there into the network to Dublin, and then being made available to the large corporations, US corporations, so on and so forth, for connectivity globally. And like at the end of the day, that's the critical part. Us being an island nation, having those large cables landing off our coast gives us the connectivity to the outside world. And that's part and parcel of our business. Our business is connecting people, and that's what we do. That's what we do every day. And it's very enjoyable.
Very good. And in your own role specifically, Damien, it's a great story there. What are some of the duties that you have to do on a week-by-week, day-by-day basis?
Well, I suppose one of the key duties for me is to keep my senior management team motivated and focused on the business and providing, I suppose, best-in-class service to our clients, ensuring we meet their needs and add value to their business is important. And I suppose the role of an MD in my scenario is really ensuring that everybody is focused on the customer. Everyone is focused on, obviously, our employees, which are important. We have a lot of them. And each single senior manager has the ability to run their own area. So, for me, one of the key things is to be able to delegate to those individuals and allow them get on with doing their job without micromanaging them, and having trust that they will drive the business. So that's part of the job. The other part of the job, of course, is to look at how we're performing from a profit and loss on a monthly basis. That's critical that you keep an eye on that, because we're across so many different types of activities that you kind of have to keep sight on all the different activities and see how they're performing, and being able to intervene in an early stage if the trends are showing you that your turnover isn't meeting the overheads to do that work. So that's part and parcel of doing the job, and that's what I would do on a monthly basis. But generally, a lot of my work is ensuring that we continue to grow the business, look at different areas of expansion. And that's what we've been very good at over the 10 years. We've expanded into many different areas that have added value to the company. So, the old saying, you had Porter's four key things looking at how do you keep your business going. And, they're quite the same today. It's all looking at the strengths, weaknesses, the opportunities. And, that still holds today for any company if you're assessing where you sit in the market. And we continually do that and see where our gaps are and what do we have to do. Do we need to buy a company to fill an area that maybe we're weak on? And that keeps you ahead of the game. And that's what it's all about.
Interesting. Briefly before we started recording, Damien, you were speaking about the huge evolution and transition you've gone through over the past year. What are some of the things that you've had to do to pivot your organization from working in office to working remotely?
Yeah, I mean, we're a year into it now, and if someone said to me prior to this that would we be able to exist without people in the office, the answer probably no. I don't think we would. And it's funny, when we had to empty the offices, which we did very quickly. Everything worked, and hats off to our IT team. Everything worked smoothly, and I suppose that was the challenge. It was really, how do you get the best part of 2,000 people accommodated remotely very quickly. Now, we were fortunate in that quite I suppose a large number of our workers do work remotely anyways in their daily job as out in the field, so they would be used to that. But still, you probably had the best part of 350 people that were office based that had all of a sudden work from home, and that was a challenge. But it's amazing. We were considering expanding our building here because we're growing at such a rate that now you kind of, I suppose for us, we'd be looking at, well, do we really need to add to the building, or can a department continually work from home? But there's also the very important thing in mental health. And that is one area that we would always look at. And we decided that anybody that felt they were more comfortable working in the office, we would accommodate them. So every manager was asked to look at their team, talk to their team. Was there someone in the team that preferred to work in the office? And then we looked at how we would accommodate them. And I think you have to be willing to do that. We have to be able to do that, because not everyone it works in the same way. And it's all about keeping employees motivated and happy. And we ran a number of initiatives as well. We did weekly videos from different people talking about different opportunities in the company, different contracts we've signed. And generally, we had personalities come and talk about their careers. I suppose Anna Geary spoke, James Tracy, the rugby player, spoke, Bernard Brogan. So we got players, to different people in different walks of life, to talk about how they were coping and what to do to cope. And we did that, and we continually run those videos for staff. And then we did staff competitions over Zoom and different things, just to try and mix it up a little bit, and I think you continually have to do that. But I'm hoping that, like everybody else, that the vaccines are going to change the way things are. Maybe not get us to where we were over 12 months ago, but at least help people get back to as normal a life as possible.
What are some of the challenges you face in your role as a managing director, considering everything is remote?
Well, I think, one of the key challenges for anybody working remotely is, I suppose, working like we are talking now over Zoom or over Microsoft Office. And I suppose trying to have that personal touch, but in a different medium. I think that's a challenge. And it's one that, it requires a lot of concentration. I find that you could spend the day on Teams calls and you're absolutely shattered. While, when you're in the meeting room, there's always small talk, so on and so forth. It's, there's maybe a bit of banter, so on and so forth. That it's kind of missing from the kind of Microsoft Teams, the Skype and the Zoom type calls. It's not as prevalent, and that's probably the challenge we have, but hopefully not for much longer,
Yeah, I agree. And in particular, when it's a small group, it's harder to create that atmosphere. It's one-to-one isn't as bad. You can have a bit of crack, but definitely in a group setting, it's a little bit awkward.
It is, and the one thing about it is, you have to concentrate more on listening and you know and then making decisions and so on and so forth. And also, there's often the body language, the body language in a room. You miss that, where you can see what people are really thinking of something, by observing the way they behave, because a lot of instances, the person that's speaking in the camera is the only person you're going to see, but you don't see the reaction of other people, which also is something that's always good to guide you in some decisions, I suppose.
Yeah, very good. How do you see the industry you're working in evolving over the next 10 years or so, Damien?
Well, I suppose the one thing I'd say in relation to the pandemic and COVID-19 is it's brought the importance of telecommunications to the forefront. And, we've worked throughout the pandemic. We haven't been stood down because we're seen as essential workers, essential to the economy. And the wonderful thing about it is brought home the importance of broadband nationwide. So the national broadband scheme that's going to be rolled out throughout rural Ireland, and where we're both from, and Achill, it'll be amazing to have gigabit broadband in every home throughout rural Ireland, and it give them a fair chance to challenge in the business world, would be it tourism, online businesses, whatever it may be, and that in itself is great for us as a business. And looking across not only Ireland but Britain and Europe, I mean, we are going to be flat to the mat on building fiber networks for the next 10 to 12 years. And that's where, we see most of our activity in building the networks and then maintaining them. A lot of the larger telecoms companies, they don't build the networks anymore. They get people like ourselves to build them. They also don't maintain them anymore. And we will maintain them. And, I look at, if you're buying a broadband connection from Sky, from Air, from Vodafone, it's a KN technician that'll rock up to your house and install it. So we do all the installs. So, I mean, that's where our business will evolve, is in the support of networks when they're built, and also in the delivery of the product into the homes. And I suppose an exciting part that will happen is the Internet of Things, which will be a game changer for people that might have elderly parents, to be able to monitor if they were in bed, where, you can have a sheet that gives information, when did someone go online, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, there's so many things that you wouldn't think of, that we years ago never thought that Apple would exist the way it has existed, and now it's massive. And I've seen, in my time in the mobile world, I've seen Nokia, who back in the day had 95% of all mobile handsets, believe it or not, go to where are they today. And it just shows you, if you take the eye of the ball, someone will be there to wipe your face, your face, at the end of the day. And that's just one example in the mobile world that I was in. And Nokia were the kingpins, and then Apple came with a product that just was easy to use. Everyone took to it, and it's gone from strength to strength, and that's the reality of it. So you always have to keep, regardless of what business you're in, you always have to keep innovating. Looking, how can I be different?
Absolutely, completely agree. Two last questions, Damien. If there's any young leaders listening to this podcast and they have ambitions one day of being in a role like yourself, what advice would you give to them?
I think one of the key bits of advice is be a good listener. I think that's important, and always have an open mind, and gather all the facts before making any decision. And I would say that. I'd also say, and I get lots of people coming to me asking me, how do I progress to where you are? There's a lot of times that the only way to progress is to move companies, gain further experience, meet different people that have different perspectives on running a business. And I think that's really what benefited me over the last, I suppose, 30 years, is moving through different types of organizations at different levels. But every single move I made from when I left National Irish Bank was a move upwards. So, my curve was always moving up, and any new challenge I went for was always something else that was more challenging, but it was a step up all the time. And and having the confidence, and the one thing that was said to me many years ago when I was in telecommunications, a guy said to me, he said, never underestimate what because sometimes we're hard on ourselves and we think we don't have the confidence to know it, but yet we know more than we think we know. And I think that was good advice. Have the confidence in yourself. And the thing, I think I listened to one of your podcasts, you mentioned you came from a family of teachers, which obviously I'm aware of, but that in your case, you were saying, all you're worried about is will you lose your job or get the sack. And those challenges, when you move jobs, when you move roles, the challenge is always, that worry will stick with you for a while, nearly till your 6 months is up and you feel more comfortable in your role. And I suppose that's you have to have the confidence to take that risk. And there are often times when I moved and I'd often think, God, did I make the right decision? But you just got to stick with it and have confidence in yourself to get out the other side. And if I give anyone advice, I'd be saying, look, have confidence in yourself, believe in yourself, but be a good listener, learn from people with experience, take that knowledge, and then don't be afraid to move to progress your career. Because often in businesses, and I've seen it because I've been in businesses where you wouldn't get promoted, even though you might have been good enough to do the job. It's funny, but it's one of those things that often happens. And the only way to progress is kind of to move,
Yeah.
I hope no one from Kane is listening to this podcast.
all load of lads leaving.
They're all bailing out.
Yeah. That Damien won't give me a promotion. No, I agree with you. And often, Damien, when I'd be coaching guys who said they really want to move into a role or they want to move into a particular space, they're not prepared to make that sacrifice, maybe to sometimes even make a sideways or a backways move that will benefit them in the long run. Last question for today, and I was speaking with Declan Weir about this. How do you think coming from a place like Achill has benefited you in your career?
I'll be honest with you. For I think from Achill, you're hard workers, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But you come from I suppose, an upbringing of where the people from Achill worked away. A lot of when I was growing up, all the men in the village, and I mean that in the best way, were working away. They worked away. They came home at weekends or at holiday time, predominantly Easter, Christmas, the summer for 2 weeks. So we grew up in that environment of going away to make a living. And the other thing I think kind of that was driven into us when we were young was education. There weren't too many homes that didn't want to drive education into their children, and that they felt the best way to success is get a good education. And I think that was one of the key things. And the other key thing that was always driven is, in your was the steady job. Be the teacher, be the Garda, in the bank or whatever, and that was driven. So I think that brought a lot home. And I'll just give you, when I met Donald Kelly, who was the owner of KM, to join this organisation, I remember he comes from rural Donegal, I come from rural Achill, and we had a lot in common. And I'd always smile. The one thing we had in common was the bog and midgets. And those are the things that can connect people. And so you had a similar outlook on life and a similar outlook to work. That you did work. You weren't afraid of work. And I suppose that's really what I believe Achill people bring with them. For sure. And there's a lot of successful Achill people that have done really, really well. And you come across them, some of them a lot older, some of them younger, and I think it's hard work and education.
I agree, and I think if you can survive the midges and the bog, you have extreme good resilience that will do you on any sales call or any negotiation in life.
That's so true, so true.
All right, Damien. Look, it was a real pleasure talking with you. Thanks a million for making time today.
No bother, Conal. Really.
Brilliant stuff from Damien there. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you did too. So many great points coming through from what he spoke about. So thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please like, share, subscribe to the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, review the podcast where you can. All those little things really help to drive a little bit of enthusiasm and energy behind the podcast, and help other people become aware of it too. And maybe they might take one or two learnings from each episode, which will help them move forward in their career and in their life. All right, see you next Thursday where we'll have another guest. And remember, get involved.